So when I showed up to Aumann Auctions, I was pretty surprised on how Kurt from Aumann Auctions actually has his whole program set up. I mean, there's different structures out there with little baby hit and miss motors everywhere. There's another outside is just full of tractors, and actually Kurt's got a pretty nice collection itself. Like I went to one of his warehouses where he's got a ton of old tractors that still haven't been out yet. Like he's still restoring these and working on them, and he's collected a bunch of old tractors. He's got a lot of collectible cool things that I wish I had. I mean, and I really think that what he's got going over there is just it's pretty special. I mean, I think that the next generation needs to know about these old tractors, because the old guys that operated these things back in the early day, they're all passing away. You know, you got to think some of these tractors are over 100 years old, so those guys aren't even around. The ones that are running them now are the sons and the grandsons that loved it. And then that just keeps stepping down to where we lose that connection to this old machinery, because there's not too many guys that want to go out there and grease this machine, put a little gas in it, get the timing set just right, roll the motor over and fire it up. There's just not too many guys that want to do that anymore. You know, we have, for instance, we have razors now that you just get in, you start it up, you put your helmet on, you turn your radio on, and you just go 100 miles an hour through the desert. That's where we're at now. But these tractors only go 1.5 miles, maybe 1.5 miles at a time, maybe, or 0.5 mile an hour. So it's slowed down, but there's something to be said about that slower part of owning an old tractor like this. And I just think the mechanics of it is what we're missing out on. People don't understand the mechanics of how things work anymore. They take it for granted that this thing's fuel injected. You're going to hit the key, it's going to fire up. It runs on a computer system that tells it to do everything perfectly. That's the generation that we're in right now. But I love the mechanics of where we came from, and I think that that's what Kurt at Aumann Auctions is really trying to get across to a lot of people, is like, hey, look, you know, I mean, you can still have a razor and do 100 miles an hour out through the field if you want, but there is something to be said about having a 100-year-old tractor sitting in your garage at home, and you know, it's pretty impressive. So I have a 1935 John Deere A, and I can fire up a couple of my cars around the shop and people think it's really cool, you know. But when you go over there and you hand crank this thing off the flywheel, and I do a tour every Friday in here, and usually the guys get to see me fire up these tractors, their eyes light up like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you can hand start that tractor. But that's how they did it back in the old days, and that's how far gone it is now. And so to bring this back to the surface and let people see what these old tractors are all about is pretty special. Kurt Aumann has auctions all the time. I mean, this guy's busy. He's finding stuff and trading and selling and moving things around, and he's a wheeler dealer. He's fun to be around, and you know, it's kind of funny because I tease him about a bunch of stuff when we're there. I mean, Kurt's a fun guy to be around. I mean, he is really a good guy. He's got a great personality, and you know, it's good to be around guys like that know where things are. I mean, this guy's probably forgot more stuff than most people know about where things are at. And I like to be friends with guys like that, because I could probably ask him about something that I'm looking for or somebody that I know, and he'd know where it is. So he's a great connection. Okay, so let's talk about this cat crawler that they had out there. So this is the Caterpillar 60 is what they call it. Now, back in the early days, in like 1920, Best actually manufactured a crawler like this. And then, so Holt and Best got together in 1925, became Caterpillar. And I mean, from here on out, Caterpillar has just been like, wow. I mean, think about all the construction that's gone on in our world today with Caterpillar. And you know, way back then, you got to think, these guys were doing a lot of work with an old tractor like that, 4-cylinder. This tractor weighed about 20,000 pounds. I mean, think about it. In 1920, what can you think of that hauled a tractor like this? They had to drive it. They drove this thing from job to job. Think about it. So get up in the morning, you're like, hey, I got to go to the next job, but it might be 15 miles away. This thing only goes a mile an hour. You spent a day or two just getting the tractor there. So there was no fences back then. Think about the barbed wire fences now we have and the property lines. They didn't care. They just took it right across the closest, fastest direction across, and they made it there. And so there's a lot of cool history with these old tractors that people don't know. So this old cat is just pulling along. This P&O plow is behind it. It's a six bottom plow, so it actually drops individually down on the ground. And you kind of drop them in a series. And there's 3 of us on there, so it made it kind of easy because we each had just 2 levers apiece. But I can only imagine what it had been like back in the old days when there's one farmer and he's farming. And he gets that old cat running, locks it in, crawls down there and sets the plows down himself and goes down. And then he jumps back on the tractor and keeps it straight. Or if he's lucky, he's got his wife or his kid out there helping him. You know what I mean? But it really, there was 4 of us running this piece of equipment, and it was still a lot of work. So I can't imagine back in the old days. I mean, that you could do though. That tractor goes slow enough that you could jump off it and go back there and set your plows in the ground, and you could go to work on it. So, but it was pretty cool to actually, hand set it down in there. You could feel it grab the dirt and actually really start to turn the dirt over. And this old cat, it just got down in the ground and just pulled it. It was really cool. Okay, so let's talk about this International. It's a 1911 2-speed Type A International. What a cool tractor. So from what I've learned is this tractor is probably the only one left in existence with this transmission. So they made 607 of these tractors, and like 67 of them ever with this transmission were in existence. So over the years, you got to think, God, it's been over 100 years. They've scrapped these tractors out. You got to think, when scrap prices were really high, these guys were taking these old tractors and just taking them to the scrapyard and chopping them all up. To make it through that many years and still be alive, that's pretty amazing. But it's kind of funny because they had like a 2-speed transmission, which we think, when you get in a tractor, you have a road gear, which is going from one place to another, right? Can you imagine, like, tractors nowadays do like 40 miles an hour, 45, you know what I mean? They can really rip. And these old tractors did like high gear, I don't know, maybe 1.5 miles. And you thought you were really going somewhere. You could actually get out and walk faster than these tractors go. But you could hook a ton of weight to them and just go. And this is a single cylinder tractor. So this thing is all of about 12 horsepower, single cylinder, and it's gear on gear. So there's no really, like, the transmission it's gear on gear. So your transmission is completely exposed right there. So yeah, you don't want to be out there working on that thing with your shirt tail hanging out, because it'll drag you inside of it and make hamburger out of you. But that's why a lot of these old farmers, you just found the tractor down in a ditch and they were all chopped up and wadded up inside of it, and I guess that's one way of going. Okay, so let me talk about Kurt's son-in-law. I mean, this kid came in this world not knowing nothing about tractors from what I know. And now he is absolutely obsessed with these old tractors and has more knowledge than anybody that I can think of on these old tractors. And he's a young guy. His name's Alex, and we had the best time. He answered tons of questions for me. He knew how to make everything out there run. And that's pretty cool. I mean, to think that this guy, I would imagine that he's got to be in his late 20s probably. And to have the knowledge that he has on these tractors was pretty dang impressive for me.
Here, got an all chain.
Here with a chain on it?
Yep.
Can you go for a ride, Marlon? I think Alex has learned a lot from Kurt over at Aumann Auctions. I mean, you got to think, this guy, Kurt, he's been around this stuff forever. He knows everything about everything. Think about it. Like, he's the root of this whole business. So his knowledge is unbelievable. And I've learned so much from these guys. and to see like him share this knowledge with all these family members and people that work for him, it just makes his company that much better.